Well, we're back again, probably for the last time in a while, I'm afraid. After this, I'll not really have anything else to talk about in terms of Aardman. When you run a still relatively small animation company that specialises in the slowest and most back-breaking form of animation possible, you're not going to get that much out in a year. But that does mean that what we do get is often charming, well-crafted, and super entertaining. Much like my channel. So let's get down to what Aardmay has crafted for us since the last time. We've got a new movie, a new show, a new special, and the last ads and music videos I've not covered yet. So mould yourself into a nice armchair and sit back and enjoy the start of Aardmay 2025. First off, we've got a pair that, surprisingly, I've not talked about for a while in Aardmay. The pair that launched the rocket of Aardman into popular culture, Wallace and Grommit. Wallace and Grommit are like the Heinz baked beans of the UK culture world. You never notice them, but they're always there, and you're always happy when they show up. I know I've been doing this for too long when I compare a plasticine dog to a tin of baked beans. But they have always been around in the background, still doing ads and BBC idents. But they made a big return last Christmas with a brand new TV movie, which also features the return of some familiar faces from the franchise, as well as some new ones, not all of whom are friendly. In a break from tradition, the movie's plot does not revolve around a new profession for the boys, but instead goes back to more or less the same setup from The Wrong Trousers, quite fittingly, with Wallace giving Grommit a present, a robot gardening gnome called Norbot, to do gardening for him. Like many of Wallace's well-meaning but overbearing gifts, Grommit's not too keen on it, but the neighbourhood sure is, and soon Wallace is hiring out Norbot for all sorts of jobs, and making the baldy one a town hero. Which naturally annoys a certain pilfering penguin from the duo's past. Feathers McGraw is still doing porridge since we last saw him, but seeing Wallace and Norbot on the TV gives him an idea for both escape and revenge. While this movie doesn't feel quite as theatrical as the previous one, I'd argue that this is the superior one overall. Were Rabbit was a fun movie, but clearly suffered from lacking a good villain, an uneven script, and behind-the-scenes tampering. This movie feels like a labour of love through and through. Everything about it feels like Nick Park was intending to make something that exemplified everything that is great about Wallace and Gromit. The charm, the creativity, the Britishness, the occasional moments of darkness, and the great interaction with our main characters. This is hands down a fantastic entry into the franchise, and honestly, wouldn't be bad as the final hurrah for the duo. I doubt it will be, but if they never make any more Wallace and Gromit after this, I'd be satisfied. What helps is Wallace's new official voice. Ben Whitehead has been doing occasional stand-ins for Peter Sallis for years, but now Sallis is no longer with us, it was time for him to step up to the stump and knock it to 6. And yes, that was a cricket reference. This is set in Yorkshire after all. I wouldn't say he's as good as Ratty himself was in voicing Wallace, but those are some big shoes to fill. But for the most part, you can't really tell the difference. He sounds just like him.
After all, necessity is the mother-in-law of invention.
There are a few times when you can still tell it's not Sallis, like when he has to scream or go a bit more high-pitched.
This is a nightmare, Grommit. The police want to throw me in jail, the neighbours all hate me, and the press think I'm evil.
But otherwise, as a successor to the original, I think he was a perfect choice. I know I was a bit negative about him in the past, but I think that was more in how I felt sad about Sallis no longer being with us. But Whitehead has really grown into the role and does a fantastic job. Grommit's still the great silent partner he always is, of course, and while this movie doesn't get quite as heavy as the first one did, no Wallace breaking down in tears or anything like that, it does get very sentimental with their relationship, which I think was really sweet. And of course, Feathers is still the dark, twisted poultry that he always was, and again shows a huge amount of emotion despite having a completely unmoving face, and it's all done through his body language, and that is super impressive. Plus the fact that his face doesn't move does lead to some really funny bits of deadpan visual humour. PC Mac, which for the record I just got the joke with his name after all these years, also returns again and is also voiced by Peter Kay as he was previously. And I admit I'm not really a fan of Kay, but he does do a good job with the voice, and I'm glad they gave his character more to do in this one, because he is very entertaining and does have some great lines.
That's a flippin' turnip!
As for the new characters, Norbot is a nice addition to the world, and despite not really having a personality, is a lot of fun and has a lot of character. helped by his also unmoving face, which makes him a good pair with Feathers, almost like a really surreal version of the comedy and tragedy symbol, and is surprisingly creepy at certain times. All of this is helped by his voice provided by the great Rhys Shearsmith, who has had a lot of experience with both entertaining and creeping people out for almost 40 years.
Pointlessly blowing leaves around!
Norbot, recharge time.
Happy nifty Norbots, we love to do our job. When we come round and fix your house, we make up quite a mob.
And the trainee policewoman, Mukherjee, I admit when I first saw her I was worried about how she might have been a superfluous character like Frizzle in Chicken Run 2, or that she would be focused on too much for the sake of introducing a new character, but she was fantastic. She's really funny, charming, and provides a good contrast to Mac as the more level-headed and logical one, and she's given just the right amount of focus while not taking too much attention away from why we're here, that being Wallace, Grommit and Feathers, so bravo on how they did her. The animation is as fantastic as always, and while they did use a little CGI in there, mostly for the backgrounds, it's integrated very well and isn't distracting in any way, unlike early Man, and does help make the more grander moments feel more epic. And of course, with anything Wallace and Gromit, we get a great chase scene at the end. It's not one of the best in the franchise, but it is a lot of fun, and gives us something unique with it being in the water, giving us something new and creative that we hadn't seen before from the duo. My only real complaint is that it does feel like it doesn't really up the ante and gives us something we've not seen before from this franchise like the last movie did. But since Wallace and Gromit have been around for so long, it's hard to do something new because they've already done it all, and to be honest, it's just really nice to see them, regardless of if they're rocking our world or not. They're just like the reliable friend of the animation world. They're not unpredictable, but they're always nice to have around. Overall, this is a brilliant entry into the franchise, and I highly recommend it for any fans of Wallace and Gromit, or any fans of stop motion in general. It does feel like after a rough patch, Aardman is back to their former luster, and I'm hoping that this brings a new age of greatness from them. But they've still been making good stuff, even if you've not noticed it's there, and we'll be getting into an example of that next time. So we get into Aardman's most recent attempt at children's programming, which I stupidly forgot to mention last year, though given it's not exactly been the most successful, you could say that that's fitting. Lloyd of the Flies. The show sadly only lasted one season, though that was more down to the channel it was being shown on going under only a year later. Not the smartest move from Aardman, but hey, could have been worse. Also, since this show didn't do so well, it means the info on it is shockingly sparse. It's not even got a Wikipedia page, so I admit I'm not sure about a lot of the production of this show, and that includes the animation, which I legit can't tell if it's CGI or genuine stop motion. Given that Aardman was suffering from a plasticine shortage at the time, it likely is CGI, but with the low frame rate, I'm really not sure, but I'm sure someone will tell me in the comments once this video is out. Regardless of its obscurity, this is actually a really good kids show. Great voice acting, animation, and writing all round. The series is about the titular Lloyd, a housefly who lives in a rotten apple core of a house with his family and interacts with all sorts of other bugs in a household kitchen, having little mini adventures and just being a kid. We've seen these sorts of setups before with bug cartoons and movies, but granted not all that recently. This isn't just ants or a bug's life again, it takes the bug society premise, but instead of it being a social commentary, it makes it more of a slice of life setup, which I think was a clever idea and something we've not really seen before from this premise. The writing is just really wholesome and has legit good laughs and is perfect for literally all ages. Anyone could watch this to the point where it really reminded me of Bluey, just slightly less cute and more British. And I do love kids shows that are like this now, that are aimed for a more younger audience but don't patronise them and give their parents something to enjoy too. It really does give me hope for a new generation. Unlike Bluey though, the show really uses its setup and environment to have a lot of creative and silly ideas that are a lot of fun. Tom Rosenthal does a great job as Lloyd himself.
I do, yes, absolutely.
Yes, I am.
It was very impressive.
But I will admit that his best friend Abacus, great name by the way, his voice is rather subdued and sounds rather like his voice actor Alex Lawther isn't really putting a lot of effort into it.
Abacus, what's on my head?
Before I tell you, I think it's a baby one. so try not to panic.
You do get used to it, but I feel it might have been better to get somebody else for this role. Most of the rest of the cast is made of up-and-comers, so no one too noteworthy to mention, besides Malcolm, who is voiced by Rob Rackshaw, who, if you've watched a lot of British kids' TV, you'll recognise him.
Wait till you see it. The entire house is an absolute tip. An insect paradise.
Schnell, schnell! Chop, chop! Andale, andale!
The series even spawned a sort of spin-off with The Adventures of Arachnofly on the YouTube channel, basically a Spider-Man spoof. They're basic flash animation shorts, but they were very charming and funny, and made more so by how the voices are provided by Lloyd in-universe.
Oh, don't get too comfortable. I will escape. I always do.
As far as I could tell, the show doesn't get as heavy as Bluey sometimes does, but that's just the tone it's going for, and it's not too devoid of life lessons and more emotional elements. It just mostly keeps things light-hearted and fun, which is what Aardman does best. Also, I do really love the intro. For something that's so basic, it's really cute and memorable. Although for me, that's because when Lloyd says, "I'm a fly,"
This is about me, Lloyd. I'm a fly.
I can't help but be reminded of this. Regardless, this is a really sweet and well-made kids show, and it's a shame that it didn't really get much of a chance to shine due to jumping onto a sinking ship. But still, what we got was really good, and I hope we get to see it return at some point in the future. But next we'll be looking at another Aardman collaboration with Kids TV, but this time it's going to be for something that was doing a lot better than CITV did at the time, and we'll look at that in the next video. So we've got a small one today, but a sweet one none the same. Aardman's contribution to Cartoon Network's Over the Garden Wall. I've never watched the show that this short originates from. I'm a bit past checking out new cartoons these days, unless it's for a video, and since this is just about Aardman, I just want to focus on this short. But from what little I've seen, it looks like a nice, sweet little show, but we're not here to discuss that. We're here to discuss the short made by Aardman that ties into the show. It's always really surreal to hear American voices come out of Aardman animation puppets.
Greg, can you just cut down on some of the nonsense?
Though, granted, the stop-motion style of this short is a very different kind of thing from Aardman's traditional fare. It sort of looks like the animation from old stop-motion shows like Bagpuss or The Clangers, but updated to look more modern. It's really interesting and fascinating to see this style in the modern day, especially with much higher frame rates than those shows and much more detailed puppets. The animation on the painted faces is really good. They have a really good cadre of expressions and it syncs up really well with the dialogue, though I think these were done with digital animation techniques, so not exactly as impressive, but it still looks great. And one thing I really like about this short is how it really immerses you in nature, very much like what Robin did, but even then that was more so suburban garden nature. This is more pure nature. And like the last time, it's really interesting to see Aardman do this sort of atmosphere, where they usually stick to more down-to-earth domestic stuff or really wacky and surreal environments. And for such a quick short, it really draws you into the moody and magical feel of this woodland world. I love it. It really reminds me a lot of Wind of the Willows, especially the 80s Cosgrove Hall version, which, fittingly, Wallace's voice actor was also in.
Villainous weasels. I'll learn them.
Granted, how much of that is due to Aardman or the writers of the original show is something I can't tell, but Aardman always put their best into everything, even if they're just goons for hire on someone else's passion project, and I always love them for that. The fact that the puppets look like they're actually hand-carved from wood is a really charming touch, like how you can see the fingerprint marks on the plasticine puppets in their more traditional stuff. The fact that these actually look like they were carved with a knife out of a block of wood is a really charming feature. Although, like with the fingerprint thing, these were probably done with more modern techniques, so they were likely 3D printed. But still, it's a really nice touch to make it look more natural. The final shot with all of them on the mini stage is super cute too. Reminds me a lot of some of the local theatre productions I've helped on in the past. The lighting is also gorgeous, a lot more ambitious than Aardman normally goes for, and it looks amazing. It really gives you that warm, comforting feeling. You may have noticed I've not really talked much about the plot, and that's because there's not really much to talk about in that regard, but that's because it's not about the plot, it's about the atmosphere and the experience of the short, and I really like that. Though, as I said before, my lack of connection of the series that it comes from means I can't really appreciate as much what's going on, but as a complete outsider, it's still a lot of fun. Overall, from the outside looking in, it's a fun little short. Like I said, I have zero connection with the source material. It's really sweet and nice to see Aardman experimenting with new technologies and styles, but they've been doing that and working for hire for others for as far back as when the company first started, and we'll be looking at some of the examples of those next time. And so we're back to ads and music videos one last time. This will probably be the last one for a while since I've not really got any more left to talk about, and this will also be a shorter one because of that. But I always do love talking about these, so let's get into them for our last video of Aardmay 2025. First off, an ad that I was surprised to find out that Aardman had anything to do with, Thatchers Cider. Or, as they call it down in the home of cider, the West Country, cider.
Sleeping cider.
While I'm teetotal now, I did drink some Thatchers back when I still drank, and I remember it tasting quite nice, but this isn't about the amber nectar, this is about the ad. As you can see, the style of these ads is unlike anything that Aardman has done before. You may have seen it used by other animation teams in recent movies like Beetlejuice 2, and it's quite outstanding. It reminds me a lot of the animation Wes Anderson uses in his animated movies, but using puppets that are now incredibly more realistic looking. It's honestly quite unnerving how realistic and at the same time not realistic these things look, but they do look amazing. I will say though that while they've got the people down perfect, they still have work to do on the other creatures. That dog kind of looks like a Sylvanian family's doll that's had a really rough life. But still, the technology alone and how we see it here shows that stop motion can still keep up with the big boys in animation and keep surprising us. In terms of the narrative of the ads, there's nothing too special. It's just a well-flowing series of vignettes to show how they make their cider, with a mix of CGI in there. But the colours are beautiful. It really makes you feel like you're at a cider farm. The main character is the company head and spokesperson, Martin Thatcher. Although I have to say that his puppet looks nothing like the real person. He looks more like a cross between Hugh Bonneville and Martin Clunes than Thatcher. But hey, you get what you get. Most of the ads involve him doing a taste test, and thank God Thatchers don't make fighting cider, or else these ads would turn into a Wes Anderson movie by the end. Either way, it's really cool to see Aardman working with new techniques, but let's get back to something that's more traditional from them. The problem with having done this for so long is that it becomes hard to find new ads that aren't like ones I've already talked about, like this country code ad. It's just creature comforts again. But every once in a while they surprise you with something very different and actually quite shocking. This is a short film they did for Greenpeace to promote environmental awareness, specifically how sea turtles are suffering from endangerment. It starts off all sweet and innocent, just seeming like a family of turtles on their way back from holiday in a car ride.
It's a video, Mum.
Oops, sorry.
How much longer? Don't worry, we'll be home in no time.
But then this happens.
Let's get you inside.
Dad? What's that noise?
Guys, it's okay.
And then it finishes off with this.
What's rubbish?
Well, now I can't watch Wallace and Gromit without getting PTSD. Thanks for that. Of course, we in the UK have scary and traumatizing PSA videos down to an art form, and yes, as this ad shows, we're still doing them. But to see Nick Park's animation style used to make this one, it legit gave me a feeling of anxiety and fear I'd not felt for a long time when watching one of these. Seeing his charming, cute cartoon characters be put through something like this, and then see them looking so crushed emotionally, it really did get to me. And honestly, I think it was actually quite a smart idea. It's that little level of messed up, but the right amount to get people to realise what's going on in a world we can't see, And to take something that we associate as being comforting and making it seem harrowing and horrific, it really does grab you and makes you remember it, so bravo there. In terms of it being made for its cause, there's always the argument of them being a bit gratuitous, or how it doesn't really provide an answer to this problem beyond signing a petition and supporting a charity that is claiming to know what to do. But this isn't a review of Greenpeace, this is about the ad, and I think it's really well made and a really clever idea. I really have to give them credit for that. It also uses some other techniques that we'd not really seen from Aardman before, like POV camera shots and more found footage feel to it, which is really interesting. I admit it's not something I might choose to watch in the future, but it is certainly very well made and I certainly won't forget it. But let's get into something more light-hearted, shall we? Well, when I said light-hearted, I didn't mean too light-hearted, because now we're visiting an old nemesis of mine, Angry Kid. Okay, I'll be honest, perhaps my thoughts on Angry Kid in the past were a bit too harsh. There is creativity, craft, and some good humour in those shorts. But my thoughts haven't changed. I find it annoying, unpleasant, and just not fun to watch. But a contrast to that is this ad, which was made in the same style of that show. This is an ad they made for Pringles, the sort of crisp snack that, despite having the most British-looking mascot since Uncle Moneybags from Monopoly, it's actually made in America. Not too surprising, since whatever potatoes they use to make these from is not the dreary, depressed, black-marked potatoes we have in this country. Regardless, this actually is quite a funny ad about a brother and a sister playing around with different Pringles in their mouths. This is vastly superior to Angry Kid already in how the characters don't talk. That's a big win right there. But more so, it's how it's brilliantly timed and has a lot of Looney Tunes-esque energy. I legit laughed at a lot of these setups and they're really creative, so I do have to give them credit there. See, Angry Kid? Why couldn't you be more like this? Although that being said, never actually do this with Pringles. They can be sharp and get caught in the throat easily. That'll be the one time when you do stop after you pop. So I think it's time to call it on the ads. Not that there aren't still more out there to talk about, but I think I've hit just about every flavour of ad Aardman has ever done. There's really not anything left that I can talk about without repeating myself. So time to move on to the music videos. But here we've got a bit of a problem. There's really only one left. Now, to be sure, Aardman has worked on other music videos providing animated segments to them, like Love Can Heal by their old pal Peter Gabriel, though it's nowhere near as fun and colourful as the last music video they did for him. I guess leaving Genesis really messed him up. Feel like I'm listening to a Lost Bjork song. Daddy by the most divisive band of the late 2000s, Coldplay, which is a sweet video, but there's not that much variety to give me so much to talk about. Hell, I wish I had more to talk about with it, because I could probably have made jokes about Coldplay being overhyped or overhated or just unlucky to get the reputation they had all day. And My Baby Cares For Me by Nina Simone, which feels more like a student animation project than anything else, but it is interesting to see some pre-Wallace and Gromit stuff from Aardman, especially since the sets have an almost German expressionist vibe to them, which is really cool. But the only one left that really gives me stuff to talk about is Barefootin' by Robert Parker, another old song that they basically did a fan music video to, but is way more surreal and creative. And for the record, this title is not a reference to a character having a foot fetish. If it was, it'd probably be Tarantino's, and my favourite song. Yes, I'm a perv, but at this point, who doesn't know that? Barefootin' is a classic 60s R&B dance song, kinda like The Twist or The Duck. Though it didn't quite catch on as much of a dance craze as those ones did, but it is a nice catchy song.
Take off your shoes and pat your feet. We doing a dance that can't be beat. We barefootin'.
But apparently Aardman's interpretation of this song is that it's sung by a bunch of aliens popping out of craters. I keep expecting to see the Soup Dragon or the Smash Mash robot pop up at any second here. Regardless of that little weird bit, the video is incredibly creative and has a ton of stuff happening all at once. And while the animation is a bit crude, since this is again pre-Nick Park animation, the fact that there's so much moving on screen all at once is really impressive. It reminds me a lot of The Trapdoor, though this isn't quite as technically grand as that show was. It is definitely applaudable in just how much detail and effort went into this video, even if it hasn't aged well in its technology. And that includes all the screen skips and juttering. Sorry about that, but it's the only video I could find of this. Also, that alien with the red dress on, does anyone think that she looks like the guy from the big nose from the Pink Panther cartoons painted green in drag? No? Am I the only one that sees it? Alright, fair enough. Also on reflection, maybe I was wrong. This does feel like a stealth foot fetish video. Either that or I'm more pervy than I thought. Either one is very likely. Also, I have to say, I love the part where the main alien pulls his nose and strums it to the tune of the bass. It's one of those things that you only see in stop motion. It's very much like something you would see in Morph. On that note, you can see how this was really made by Peter Lord. It does have a lot of that Morph-like style and techniques to it, and I've always loved the Morph style, both in animation and in comedy, so to see it in something unrelated like this is quite fun. Regardless, Aardman's style has changed a lot over the years, but their sense of fun and creativity has never died, as both this video shows and the other things we've looked at Aardmay this year. I hope you've enjoyed this year's videos, and as I said, I'll probably be having to take a break from this for a bit as Aardman has to catch up with me and make some more stuff for me to talk about. This is one of the downsides about doing a series about a stop motion animation company, and that I can make these videos a lot faster than they can give me things to talk about. Either way, I don't see Aardman ending anytime soon, and once they've made more stuff to talk about, I'll be there to bring it all back to you. But until then, see you next time. Bye!